This is the beginning of To The Point, your briefing on Asia's entertainment business.
I'm Janine Stein.
And I'm Patrick Frater.
And if it's happening in content, streaming, cinema, or corporate chaos, we're talking about it.
So let's get to the point. Janine, what have you been up to this week?
This week for me has been all about ATF wrap up and getting people's feedback and figuring out where they're going to be next and what their plans are for 2026. But you've had a much more exciting week than me at CineAsia.
Well, maybe. We were both at ATF last week, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you have digested from that and what the follow-up conversations have led to.
Well, coming out of ATF, I was really enthusiastic, as you saw, and really energized about all the activity, all the talk, all the full conferences, the activity on the market floor. But it seems like people are saying there's not a lot of buying, and they're hopeful that there will be, but they're not convinced that they're moving into 2026 with full order books. So that's something to watch.
I was at CineAsia for 4 days this week. CineAsia is the annual convention for film exhibitors. That means theatre owners and operators and distributors, held annually in Asia. It's been held in Bangkok for the last 4 years, so it's going to move on next year to a new location, we think, in Seoul. And as always, it is pretty heavily dominated by the Hollywood studios, who are presenting their release slates for the next 12 to 18 months and jockeying for position and telling the cinema owners what's coming up and how much space they should make for their content, really. And equally, there's exhibitors telling you what their gripes are and what their ambitions are. And there's on the side of it, usually there's an equipment market. It felt rather small this year, but the talk was quite often about premium large format and other add-ons to make cinema more of an experience, because clearly people are feeling that there's a problem. The cinema going has not returned to pre-pandemic levels anywhere in Asia consistently, except in Vietnam. Vietnam is the big exception. And that's a problem. But that has led to some interesting discussions.
You said, or somebody said something about there being a lot of talk about more comfortable seats.
There has been a lot of, and more comfortable seats, but in particular, larger screens, better sound, some of those shaky seats, but also the kind that wrap around the auditorium, so it's 270 degrees. Felt like it, and people pay for that, and the equipment suppliers tell you that there's a very high return on investment, often within 9 months on that kind of thing, because people will pay extra and they will come back and they will have an experience, and then they will tell their friends who will also go to that kind of thing. But one of the things that is the most interesting to me is how 2 years ago at CineAsia, I'm not going to name this person's name because I'm not supposed to. We signed NDAs to go into CineAsia. But 2 years ago, one of the major Hollywood studios stood up on the platform and said, "We had it wrong. We have been treating local film in Asia as a competitor, as a rival, as the enemy for too long. And in fact, it is what has sustained cinema through the pandemic years and is going to help it to grow." So that was the kind of the watershed moment 2 years ago, and that theme has been continued. And unusually this year, it felt like there was even more talk of local film, and there were presentations by local studios. There was a Japanese one. China Film Group had a presentation, and the biggest and most professional was actually by a Vietnamese company, which came and told us what they're going to be making and releasing and hopefully selling around the region for the next 18 months. That was definitely an impressive show.
So this is good news for Asian cinema, and also coming on the back of the close of the Singapore Film Festival, which was up, what, like 30%?
Yes, it was.
I'm finding the hole between the actual state of cinema in Singapore and the results of the Singapore Film Festival hard to understand.
Well, you're making an interesting point. the admissions and the cinema business in Singapore has been declining quite significantly, and it's changed its nature as well. It's remained a very Hollywood dominated market. I think 95%, 96% of the admissions are for Hollywood films in Singapore. But the number of visits, which was extremely high per capita in Singapore, has now collapsed down to much more normal levels. And that means that Singapore has too many cinemas and people are not attending often enough. And in the past year, we've seen 3 separate cinema chains close, and the Projector, which was the major indie screening company in Singapore, has also closed. So yes, there is definitely a problem in theatrical cinema for Singapore, but get some good programming, and the festival turned out more than 30% increase in visits this year. So it's not completely dead. That's a good thing.
Well, I just thought, I mean, what you said, and I've said this for, I don't know, 20 more years, talking about the industry as a whole without talking about what you're actually offering people is really not logical to me. So if we're saying pay TV is dying or something's dying, why is it dying? And I think that this film festival proves that if you program for a specific audience, they'll come, because these were not free tickets. There were 44 completely sold out screenings in what, 10 days? So
that's right.
So where are these? I mean, they're in Singapore, so they're obviously coming and they want to see stuff. So that's one of the things that, again, came out of last week, ties in with what you said about CineAsia, big experience, better programming. What did you think of the slates that were being offered? Or that were being showcased?
In CineAsia, well, I'm not allowed to discuss them on the pain of death from the studios, but it was interesting to me that some of them were playing down the idea of franchises, but they were also trying to talk up things which appeal particularly to Asian audiences. I think there's a lot of horror films coming out of Hollywood in the next couple of years.
Which is interesting.
That's been a big trend in Asia, particularly in Indonesia and particularly from Thailand for the last several years. So that's not a surprise. But no, I think the Hollywood studios were trying, their message was trying mostly to say that they are almost completely back to full volume of production. And that is important to them and to the exhibitors, because they suffered a collapse in production during COVID, and then another dip due to the twin strikes in Hollywood in 22, 23, whichever it was, which had a lag effect, which they're just about finishing now. And so next year, 2026, they will have a full slate. And that's important also because, as someone explained to me very carefully in a corridor conversation, we've got more and more films being made around the world and more pieces of content which are playing in cinemas, whether it's stage plays, concerts, sports events. In some countries, there are more than 3,000 different pieces of content playing on cinema screens, which is huge. And it's certainly up from the several hundred that we used to expect a few years ago. But they made the point that the top 200 films still account for the same 85%. So those top biggest films, whether it's local or Hollywood, are still what drive the vast majority of the business and keep the cinemas in business with their doors open.
Do you think any of the okay, let's put it this way, the elephant in the room. Do you think any of the conversations were shaped by the unfolding situation out of the US?
Well,
Warner, Netflix.
You've just said it. The elephant in the room. I went to this convention day in, day out for 4 days, and on the platform, the N word, N being Netflix, not worse, was only uttered one time. And I thought all the stuff on the stage and on the platform in these staged conversations was actually avoiding this big issue, which was absolutely the dominant conversation in all the corridors. There were 2 studios there which seem to be in competition for each other at the moment, and the threat to the system, as some people see it, from a streamer gobbling up a Hollywood traditional studio. So yes, absolutely, it was the most important conversation of the week.
There's such a huge unknown. Obviously, I'm looking at it from the Asia perspective and the impact it will have on Asia. And I think in Asia, my perspective, in Asia, we're so used to watching Hollywood from afar, kind of shaking our heads, scratching a little bit, thinking, what are they up to? What are they doing? And not really having a seat at the table in strategy or direction. So, I mean, not more than one head of American companies in Asia has said, we just carry out instructions. We are the outpost and we ruled by whatever happens in LA, which I totally understand. They understand too. But I think that we look at what happens in Hollywood in the US, wait for the fallout, and then just like shrug our shoulders and carry on with doing whatever we're doing. I don't know that anybody at Warner or Paramount has any conviction at all that their jobs are safe before this potential merger. And the Laos have already swept through Asia. I mean, I absolutely love Netflix. As a consumer, I love what they do. I love what they offer, but I also like the others. So I don't know if having Netflix absorb all the Warner content is good for our ecosystem. What happens with the relationships with CJE&M, for instance, and TVing? What happens to Unext? What happens to GeoStar? I mean, GeoStar and Netflix compete. So, especially in India, and then in Japan, Warner sold their whole library to Unext. So, and Unext, they tell me they're second to Netflix. So how does that work? Because then all this really valuable Warner properties come off and go into Netflix potentially, or maybe, I mean, Warner
Or maybe not.
Or maybe not. So
or maybe not. I
knows?
mean, you're right. All of those supplier client relationships are a little bit complicated, but they're already complicated. I mean,
Agree.
TVing is majority owned, or not majority, predominantly owned by CJE&M,
Yeah.
which owns
Yeah.
Studio Dragon, which is the biggest supplier to Netflix in Korea. So
Anyway.
that's already a complicating factor. And then you see how TVing is trying to expand overseas by being carried on other rival platforms. So yes, that's going to be complicated. In India, you've mentioned GeoStar. I mean, HBO is carried within GeoStar, and Netflix is the tiny competitor, a long way third in at least in subscription subscription numbers.
To me, those Asian relationships are really interesting because, I mean, not a week ago, I had the conversation with CJ on stage at ATF saying, and they're very optimistic about the TVing international expansion, but this deal could scupper all of that.
It could. I mean, you're right, and I think you and I have both offline talked about the how Asia is really not the prime consideration for these takeover bids. You know, it's all about what's happening in terms of tech and finance, and in terms of Hollywood. And the Asian component is a long way behind. Even though I think many people, both you and I as well, have made the comparison between this bid and what happened 2 or 3 years ago when Disney gobbled up Fox. And there was a significant Asian component to that, though it never seemed to be front and center in the reasoning, the component being Disney's Hotstar.
Which is pretty much disappeared. I mean, nobody calls it Disney Plus Hotstar anymore. I don't know if Hotstar Specials is still a brand in India. I called this week, I called Asia a rounding error, which is not necessarily, I didn't come up with it. It's come to me through the years and been repeated often enough. Australia is the biggest, Australia is the Western market, but the rest of it.
Well, Australia's an English language market, but Japan is, I think, probably the most financially lucrative of the markets for those studios, and for Netflix as well. So we can't rule Asia out, but it doesn't seem to be setting the agenda here.
The Saudi involvement. I mean, we do cover the Middle East in a small way. The Saudi involvement was interesting to me, but obviously people have been jumping up and down in the US at the thought of or even Qatar or Saudi owning CNN, if that deal goes through. So I think it's incredibly, incredibly complicated, regardless of who's involved.
Well, if we get onto the regulation point, yes, it will get complicated. Maybe we should come back to that in a moment.
Maybe.
But I mean, I think within Hollywood, people are already kind of terrified by the idea that Netflix might gobble up a Hollywood studio. They fear it means an end to their way of life. It means probably fewer jobs, more data-driven calculations, an end to some of the back-end deals, and possibly, just possibly, a reduction in the number of theatrical releases. Not if you believe what Ted Sarandos is saying. He says no, Warner's going to be kept going as a theatrical studio. And he says that's additive because it's all areas that Netflix is not engaged in. And for the same reason, he says that, you know, third-party program sales of content made by Warner Brothers TV studios is going to continue to be sold to third parties. He's kind of suggesting no change, but well, I think people are very worried by.
You believe him. I mean,
let me say, let's suggest that I do believe him completely for the moment.
Okay.
The idea that you have the world's largest streaming company gobbling up an old and venerable and second largest of the Hollywood studios to create a company which is going to be worth, I don't know, $500 billion frightens people. Whereas, you know, the existing studios are much more manageable. But I think, you know, the alternative combination of Paramount and Warner, that's duplicative. You know, you've got two studios going into one. Let's say both are making 30 movies a year at the moment. I've just said they're now back up to full speed almost. Are they really going to make 60 movies, releasing one a week? I don't think so. I mean, if I were their management, and looking at the cost of doing that, I would not be expecting to release that many. And honestly, the Paramount Skydance people have already said they're looking for $6 to $7 billion of annual cost savings out of their combined company. And that's on top of the slimming down which has happened within Paramount already. If we're looking at it from a jobs point of view and disruption to Hollywood point of view, I would actually suggest perhaps that the Paramount bid is the more disruptive.
So looking at it from, I get it. I get you. I get what you're saying. But looking at it from an Asia perspective, Paramount's business in Asia is don't really have Paramount Plus. Don't really have a streaming presence. That's a licensing business, which is a good licensing business. They've already hollowed out all the staff. It's all gone. They're all gone. But as I said, I am so familiar with standing on the sidelines going, well, Hollywood will do what they do. I'm watching these gladiators go for it, like do whatever you have to do.
I agree. It's quite fun to watch the name calling and the various pieces of macho and braggadocio as people try and outbid each other and come in with a hostile bid and get such and such a regulator on site. I agree. It's exciting.
We were lucky to have 20 years of the same pay TV industry. We were lucky because it was a big story. It backed into the business plans that were presented, so they would get green light from the US. Spent 20 years or at least 15 years trying to back into those big promises and big plans. Actually, all they really wanted was another landing spot with a few exceptions, very, very few, another landing spot for all the stuff that was being made outside, trying to amortize it in Asia. And that's it. So nobody ever wanted to really invest in local content, in local ecosystems. Netflix came and they did it.
Well, that was exactly what I was going to come back to you with.
I'm a Netflix. Regardless of what goes on screen, they're building a creative ecosystem the way no other American company has. And who says that the American companies will do it? You buy whoever you want to buy. Are you creating benefit for Asia? And I would say no. Somebody actually tried to tell me that White Lotus was a Thai production. I was speechless. I was so speechless. Oh, HBO does make stuff in Thailand. They made White Lotus. I just looked at the guy. Like, what are you talking about?
Yes, I mean it was clearly a service production with local facilitate. Some of them do get executive production credits on the show. It looks like it on the surface. You get two Hollywood studios, two very familiar systems being put together. A certain amount of overlap, as I've mentioned earlier on. But maybe we should think of Paramount Skydance as a tech player. I mean, remember this deal is being backed by Oracle. Oracle being, one of the largest tech companies in the world, and the one that may end up owning the American piece of TikTok. This is not a pure play 35mm celluloid film business anymore.
Yeah.
We've moved on a long, long way. And maybe they will bring some of the tech industry efficiencies. Them or Netflix will bring some of the tech industry efficiencies and ways of working that Hollywood is not used to and that has got away with for, as you say, 20 years.
It's
You don't like that one.
I don't not like it, but I don't think it's an Oracle play.
Let's look at the regulatory issue for a moment. As I've said, Netflix coming in and buying Warner looks like a huge behemoth on the market with pricing power, able to jack up subscription prices, able to reduce the number of services, with direct connections to, I don't know, 400 million subscribers around the world. That looks like a very powerful company which monopoly regulators will want to have a look at. The counter argument to that, from which I'm sure Netflix will be advancing, is that premium TV is actually a declining market. More and more people are watching stuff on their phones, on social media, and on YouTube. In particular, YouTube, which is the biggest TV company in the world these days.
I'm in that camp. So I'm 100% in that camp. The monopoly, if you only look at a very small slice of the entertainment industry and engagement with stuff that goes on screen, then okay, maybe you can frame it as a monopoly. But actually, you can't, because it's a race for people's attention, and there's no monopoly. But Netflix doesn't have a monopoly. No, even if Netflix combined with Disney and Warner and Paramount, they still are competing with TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. It's not I don't see it as a monopoly at all. I think that if it suits you, you can frame it as a monopoly, but I don't think there's a monopoly. I don't think there's only a monopoly if you choose to view it like that.
If you choose to focus very narrowly, you can find them all over the place. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, so what's next? What's next for you, Janine? What are you doing next week?
Next week I'm cleaning up. It's like how many days to Christmas? 13 days to Christmas. Next week I'm cleaning up. We're starting to wind down. We put a few things, and then it's planning for the CineAsia Awards. So it's just all the planning stuff that goes on at the end of the year while everybody else is out drinking wine. I'm sitting trying to close the year. It's a boring week, sorry. In other words, it's a boring week. And I still haven't got to watch Dear X.
I was going to say, what are you watching now?
I did watch this week, The Beast in Me. I would recommend it. And then I watched 2 microdramas. Sorry. What did you watch?
And God, not very much, to be honest. I spent a lot of time in conferences. On your recommendation, I did start watching Mr. Mercedes. It's very dark. Not too sure.
It gets darker.
Not too sure I'm going to continue, but I think I need to try it a bit further. I watched a very, very arty Chinese film from last year, which its name is The Legend of something like The Legend of the Tapestry Universe, and it feels like wallpaper that moves. It's beautiful, but it's really not an exciting movie. And I look forward now that the Golden Globes has told us what their nominations are. I shall narrow down my focus on and watch the last few films I haven't seen on the list before voting in January, I think it is.
You're a Golden Globes voter.
Yes, I am.
I'm envious.
Well, it's my first time this year, and I've got a whole stack of things that I've had to get used to.
Like what? Like what?
You're being deluged with invites and press releases from people I've never heard of before, getting transcripts of press conferences that have taken place in the US, hurry ups and whip cracking from the organizers of the Golden Globes, telling me to make sure I've seen everything and make sure I get my votes in, and things like that. And then I read.
Do they give you a screening room, like an online?
There's a virtual screening room which is quite functional. And then in the last few days, while I was out at the conference, I started getting DVDs in the post, which is completely unexpected. So
you have a DVD player?
I guess I do. I think it's a
DVD?
Blu-ray.
That's crazy.
It's a Blu-ray player that I hacked a few years ago to play everything. But I haven't used. I use it once a year, and now I've got a stack of DVDs coming through the post.
Well, I'm sorry, but that goes back. So I haven't seen a DVD for years. I use them to make circles for my pottery, but goes back to the old thing. Like, is hot. I mean, Japan DVDs are still, you still get them, but it's a culty thing. But DVDs, are you serious?
I think it's the same thing, actually, Janine. I mean, the same films are available either on my streaming service, which I'm paying for, or on this Golden Globes internal streaming service. But by giving me a DVD, I guess the studio is thinking it adds prestige. It's going to make it top of mind, and make me feel better about this film or show.
Sorry, does this face say, "Oh my God, you're being so kind"? Why? Anyway, I think it's just pathetic. Sorry, I think it's retro and pathetic, and it's a waste of energy and paper and
mastering.
The grand scheme of world peace, etc., etc. I guess it doesn't matter. I wanted to look at some of the headlines of the week, but what were your headlines of the week?
You've been doing better than I have.
Have I?
You must have been. As I said, I've had my head in a conference most of the time.
Okay, so then maybe I'll talk about my headlines of the week.
Do that.
So this is not 100% news story, but TV Asahi in Japan surfaced it today or yesterday, and there's a Korean remake of Dr. X, which I felt was very interesting because Korea is traditionally not a market that there's a huge pride in being the creative epicenter of Asia and sometimes the world. So to remake a Japanese drama, they have done some co-productions, but to remake a Japanese IP is very interesting to me, and I look forward to seeing more because I think those barriers should be broken down. There are stories in Japan or elsewhere that Korea could remake. So I think that was one of the interesting headlines. And then the data leak, I know it's not strictly it's not strictly video or TV, but the data leak in Korea, in Kupang, the biggest data leak in Korean's history. So that was very interesting to me. The CEO resigned. They brought in a guy from Kupang, US, to try and right the company because it's really listing all over the place. The cybersecurity police from Korea have been all over Kupang's office. It was a massive data leak. They're pointing to a Chinese, one of their disgruntled ex-Chinese employers, but I don't know if that's just gossip or it's just been doing the rounds on social media and in local media. But it's just massive. It's like maybe 34 million accounts, personal data was hacked. So that was one of the things out of Korea. And then in India, what I found the headline of the week was that GeoStar is spending something like $450 million over 5 years on Southern programming. So the 4 Southern languages. So that's a big push south. I like
Well,
it.
that's the least surprising. I mean, the numbers are always huge with Geo.
I think it's not surprising, but it's nice to see and hear.
Yes,
I mean, you wrote the story about Kevin Vaz talking about Geostar, a country, a planet, a universe, whatever he said. I mean, it was amazing.
yes, I did. But in India is so not what people think it is when it comes to media. It's not one country. It's 30 or more. I mean, goodness knows how many languages there are, really. They talk of the film industry in about 20 different languages. Its distribution within India, at least in the feature film business, is regional, not even statewide, and therefore films get bought and sold with minimum guarantees, or more likely sort of outright sales to different distributors in different regions of the country. It's not unified at all.
No.
That's one of the interesting things we've seen in the last decade or so, when the Hollywood studios have tried to crack India, and they've failed to do it with local production. They've doubled down on their Hollywood movies. That's been facilitated by multiplexing in India.
Yeah.
But they have the Hollywood studios are the ones who have led the way in terms of subtitling and dubbing and releasing their films across the country. And that is a lesson that the Indian film and TV studios have also followed and learned from. So to see Geo going this way isn't a surprise. It's good to see it. You'll see.
I like it. And they did this, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but they did this like gigantic song and dance. They had ministers and all the stars from India. So I thought that was really, I love that stuff.
Great to see. I mean, we've seen Southern Indian films in many ways edging aside the traditional Hindi-led Bollywood market in the last 2 or 3 years at the nationwide box office, and so you're seeing Tamil and Telugu films playing in traditional Hindi markets. Interesting there.
And it's great because it expands the pie for everyone.
And there will be more coming. This was not just a flash in the pan. It's happening.
And back to headlines for 1 second. So I think one of the trends for 2026 is the breaking down of barriers between countries, between regions. Certainly India has, as you said, many. Beta Film in Germany has picked up worldwide rights outside of Korea to their first Korean drama, which I thought is another breakthrough. So it's one little announcement, but it's actually part of a much bigger trend. I think when we sit here 1 year from now, we'll see more and more. So it's Japan, it's almost everyone I know has got the first of a kind deal with a neighboring country or another country. So Beta picking up Korea. They bought Snow White Must Die. So it was known, it's not new in Korea, it was known as Blackout in Korea. So I thought that was another interesting one.
Yes,
and
that series played at some of the TV festivals earlier this year, I think. So you're right, it's not new, but to see a German company selling it and promoting it worldwide is.
Right.
But you and I both saw that exactly the same kind of thing when we were in Indonesia at Jaff Market 2 weeks ago. The place was crawling with Korean companies looking for Indonesian content to carry internationally.
Yeah. So I'm watching that because I think everyone's in the same boat looking for opportunity. And so there is opportunity, and it's just up to people to whether they're going to grab it or not. Another thing that I put on my list was the 33% increase in ticket sales for SGIFF. We spoke about that already. And then the last highlight is this ABS-CBN in the Philippines, which has been struggling since 2020 to lost its license, broadcast license, long twisted story, but basically it's been aligning with all other players in the market, and now there's I don't know how much local media mischief making, but there is conflict and clash. So it's another high drama out of the Philippines that made headlines in the last week.
Well, I'm going to throw one last one back at you.
Yeah. You end with the headline.
Well, I mean, I was reading the headline, I think in the last 12 hours or 24 hours, suggesting that MM2, which is the Singapore-based
yeah.
exhibition company, which is looking like it's on its last legs. It looks like it's been given 4 months of reprieve, in which time it can go and fix its relations with landlords and other creditors. Perhaps in 4 months' time, we will not be writing MM2's obituary.
And that's to the point. I'm Janine Stein.
And I'm Patrick Frater. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.